Today, we're going to talk a little bit about internet safety, and also just generally about the effects of electronics and the electronic age and this, safety in that regard. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about what the dangers are, and then Brother Ajamu is going to talk more about what we can do to safeguard our homes and our devices and that type of a thing. So, inshallah, they're related to each other. So this first half will be, as more of an educational piece in terms of making sure everybody's aware of what's even out there. Because I think a lot of us as parents, we don't even realize what kind of stuff our children are exposed to. And then again, Brother Ajamu will go into, what tips that we can get to make sure that we safeguard as best as possible our children, inshallah. So I wanted to talk about a few things. So the original premise was mainly about internet, but I wanted to touch on other types of electronics as well, because the issue is not just internet, okay? The issue is not just computers. There's a lot of things that our children are exposed to when it comes to electronics, and I want to make sure that everybody's kind of aware of some of the stuff that's out there. So number one, just the different types of devices and what are some of the things that can happen on these different types of devices. Secondly, we'll talk a little bit about movies and TV shows, and then the rating system, so that you're aware of what these things mean. Like sometimes you see on TV these letters pop up on the top of the screen. There's meanings behind them, and what do those things mean, and how does that affect us? And then thirdly, obviously, then the internet itself, right? What are some of the things on the internet that we need to be mindful of and aware of? Social media. This is the big thing nowadays, is social media, right? Video games, and this is a lot of ways where some of the backdoor stuff happens. You think, oh, it's just a video game, and there's a lot of other things that go on with the video games themselves. And then just at the end, some of the Islamic implications behind all of this. So we realize that it is a big deal. Okay, this stuff is a big deal. Inshallah, we need to be aware and vigilant and make sure that we're doing what we can, inshallah, as best as possible. So, again, in terms of the format, again, I'll give my presentation, maybe about a half an hour or so, and then I wanted to leave as much time as possible for questions and answers, and then we'll switch over to Brother Ajamu, and he'll give his presentation, and then there'll be questions and answers before we leave. You can do that again on your the index cards, and you'll be able to pass that in, inshallah. Okay, so you can go ahead and do that. Now, when it comes to devices, obviously there's many ways that our children get content. Okay, so many different ways that our children get content, and less is from books, unfortunately, right? Less and less is from books, and it comes from a variety of different electronic means, okay, electronic media. And even when it comes to electronic books, as one of the brothers was mentioning before the talk, there's a lot of what they call in-app purchases, right? Or purchases that happen while you're inside of a particular app, or even a particular book, if you're in a magazine, or something that on the surface looks like it may be educational or whatever, and they just make that click and it takes them somewhere else that was completely unintended. Okay, so there's a lot going on with these electronic forms of things, and even when you think you have control of certain things, there's again backdoor ways that they get pulled away. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So we have TVs, obviously, and even with TVs now, there's smart TVs, right? And the smart TVs also give access to the internet. And this is one of the things that I'm going to talk about through some of the other bullet points that I mentioned before too, is that television systems themselves can hook you up to the internet. You have the video game systems themselves also can hook you up to the internet. And it's not just that the child is there watching the show that's okay, right? So you have, let's say you gave them a TV in their room, which I would strongly advise against. Any kind of electronic in the room, I would strongly advise against that. But they have it in the room, you think, oh, it's just TV, right? They have access to only whatever they have on the TV, on that channel or whatever, right? But if it's a smart TV, it hooks up to the internet, then they have access to whatever apps that are on the TV. So it could be internet itself, it could be Netflix, or a number of other different type of avenues, right? And the same thing with the video game system. The video game system doesn't just play what's on the disc. The video game system also can play other things. So making sure that we're aware of how our children can reach the internet with different types of devices, right? So two big things when it comes to this issue. Number one, do we allow our children to have their own device? This is a big question that you're going to have to answer for yourselves as a family. I'm not going to give you an answer for that. That's something that you're going to have to decide for yourselves, what you think you've prepared your child for, what you think they can handle, what are they mature enough to deal with. But just to hand it over without any kind of preparation is a recipe for disaster. And I, again, really want to caution that if you have not, as they've been growing up, been instilling in them this idea of, knowing who Allah is and that Allah sees everything, and that you want to please Allah no matter where you are, and Allah's watching, right, from when they're young. If that hasn't been instilled and that culture has not been placed in them and it's in their heart, you're just dropping this phone on them, or whatever, the tablet or whatever it is that you're giving them, it's a recipe for disaster. There's just so many issues. And even if you have done that, it's still dangerous. Okay, it's still dangerous. But if you have not, without any kind of training, without any kind of warning, without any kind of preparation, don't get angry if you find that your child has gone on something. Because realistically, it's just too easy and the temptations are too big. Okay, it's too easy and the temptations are too big, right? And we'll get into that a little bit more. So number one, should they have access to these things of their own, where they say it's mine, this is my phone, this is my tablet, this is my laptop, this is my TV, right? Because if you do that, there is a level of autonomy that you've given them, which is fine, depending, again, what preparation that you gave to them, okay? And then secondly, do children have access to the devices in private spaces? So it's one thing, for example, let's say you give them, a cell phone, for emergencies or whatever reasons, but then they have it, and they have it all night long, right? You don't know what's going on when at bedtime, or they have this TV or the video game system in the room, okay? You don't know what's going on in there all the time. So you have to be very mindful of those two things. Number one, is it the right time to give my child one of these devices to be theirs, right? Have I prepared them properly? And then number two, when do they have access and where do they have access to the device, right? So maybe you do give them the cell phone and you say, okay, when you get home, you got to turn it in, right? Or all the computers, for example, are in public places. It's very different, right? It's a different situation. Now, even then, and Brother Jamu might touch on these things, even then it's not foolproof, obviously, but inshallah there'll be other mechanisms that he'll talk about in terms of how to deal with those type of situations. Now, at the end, I have links. So when we share this with you, I have links to different evidence for these things. So I didn't have time to get into all the evidence and scholarly work and all that behind this stuff. I'm just going to say it, and you can believe me or not, but inshallah you'll get the links so that you can read it for yourself, inshallah. But just screen time by itself, all right? No matter what kind of screen it is, TV screen, computer screen, mobile device, whatever it is, right? Screen time by itself has effects. And it doesn't even matter what they're looking at. It doesn't even matter what they're looking at. There was a study that I was reading that it talked about, small children, babies, that can't even process the information. Like, they don't even understand what's going on the screen, right? And they said any kind of screen time affected their behavior, like attention and things like that, right? And it didn't even matter that it was violent programming or sexualized programming or anything like that. Anything, right, had an effect. So we need to be mindful and conscious of how much screen time our children have, period, whether it's positive stuff or negative stuff, okay? The recommended amount, and again, recommended, what does that really mean, right? They say maximum 2 hours. Now, they say recommended. A lot of times they give these recommendations because they know that we can't say 0 because nobody's going to listen to 0, right? So let's kind of give the worst of the evils and say 2 hours, right? It's not necessarily even, based on any kind of data, but I guess 2 is better than 4. And the average is around 5 hours, actually, for most youth, of some type of screen time per day. Per day, that's the average. So if some of these negative effects are actually occurring, and they're occurring even with the 2 hours, imagine double that or triple that, okay? So just to be mindful of that. And some of the things that some of the studies have mentioned, are violent behavior from the child. This is not what they're witnessing. Okay, this is not what they're witnessing. This is the behavior that the child himself is exhibiting. Okay, so violent behavior or anger or aggression. Okay, so a heightened sense of that. Number 2, attention disorders. There's some studies about that. Levels of obesity, again, because the child is just kind of sitting there, plopped down. All right. Social issues, depression, and this has a lot with social media and things like that. This idea of influence, okay, subliminal messaging that goes on, and this goes a lot with commercials and whatnot, and even the advertisements that come up, like I said, on the side of websites and things like that. All these little commercials that pop up, there's subliminal messaging that goes on, whether it be commercial things to encourage you to buy things, whether it be sexual, whether it be behavioral, all these different type of things. And just so you know, I'm not gonna shy away from using words, okay? I'm gonna be straight up with everybody. There's a lot of sex stuff on the internet. You need to be aware of it. You can't hide from it. I'm not gonna mince my words when it comes to it. It's nasty and it's out there, and you gotta be aware of it. And don't think that your child is not doing anything with it, okay? And just be aware of that. And there's actually evidence about brain damage itself. Brain damage itself, like the gray matter that's between the synapses and stuff like that, where a lot of the thinking happens, that can actually deteriorate depending on how much screen time. So, and I have the evidence for that, inshallah. So, again, just generally, talk about devices at large. Don't just think computer, or don't just think TV. You have to be thinking of all of them at once. So say, oh no, my child doesn't watch 2 hours of TV. Okay, but are they on their cell phone for 45 minutes? Then they have their half an hour TV show, and then they have their hour and a half of video game. All right, you're already over the 2 hours, right? So you have to be thinking of the whole thing holistically. Okay, all this exposure. Now I wanted to kind of just touch on this a little bit about TV shows and movies and the ratings that are out there. And the first thing that I just want to mention when it comes to this is that we have to remember who it is that's making these decisions, right? They're not like Islamic scholars putting these labels on these TV shows and these movies, right? These are people who have even different views about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. And even when it comes to that topic, that changes through time, right? Their decisions are not based on revelation. Their decisions are based on their decisions, whatever research or whatever the norms of the time. So there were certain things that I know growing up, there was no way that they would show on TV. There were certain words that there was no way they would have it on TV. And now it's become very commonplace. So the same thing that would have been a rated R before now becomes a PG-13 and then becomes a PG. And it's the same information, the same content, the same type of theme, but it's changed. So I'm mentioning these things for educational purposes, but you also have to be aware that just because it says PG, for example, if you were to watch it, you may realize, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this. So use this as kind of like a clue or a hint as an initial bit of research, but you're going to have to go in and really pre-screen some stuff. Watch the show first. Watch the movie first. If you're prone to being those that allow that, you need to make sure that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that this is something that's okay, for your child to see. Okay, so just quickly, so you have here, this is for movies, right? And you've seen it, G, PG, PG-13, rated R, and NC-17. Okay, NC-17, period. No Muslim should ever go to that. I think that's pretty clear. Okay, that's like practically rated X, which is completely inappropriate. Type of a thing. Rated R, obviously, again, family by family, you decide what you're going to do, but you got to be very careful with rated R. And actually, more important than the ratings, they've changed the actual labeling of the movie themselves. So before, they would show rated R really big, and it would say like restricted audiences, okay? And then really small, it would say why. So it might say like brief sexual nudity or suggestive language or profanity, something like that, right? But it would be small. They've actually changed it actually to our benefit, where those reasons actually are bigger now on the label. So whether it's PG, PG-13, read those labels and read the reasons why it got the rating that it got. Okay? Read the labels and read the reasons. because that'll give you actually more insight. Because sometimes, they'll put something as a PG-13, and maybe it's for, sci-fi battling, and for you that's not that big of a deal. But another one will give you a PG-13 because of suggestive sexual behavior, and that's more of a big deal for you, right? So you can make a better decision about what you might kind of allow your child to watch or not, okay? So just to kind of be aware of those things. Now, of course, they don't want to make anything easy, so they have a different system for TV than they do for the movies, right? Just to confuse everybody. And then if you live in Canada, it's even different. If you live in other places, it's different from that. But the TV ratings as well. So this is from I guess you would say the cleanest to the most mature side of the spectrum. So when you see the TV show pop up, you'll see these letters pop up on the top of the screen, usually on the upper left-hand side. So you'll see for example, the TV-Y, and this means for all children. But usually what you'll see is, if you see here this TV-Y7, for example, it says directed to children or older children, and then it has letters underneath. Those letters stand for something. So here, for example, it has an F and a V. I know it may be difficult to read, but just trust me. The third one on the left, it says TVY7, which means it's for older children, and then it says F and V. And there's more than just those letters, but in this case, F and V. So the F means fantasy. So there's going to be some kind of magical, whatever kind of stuff in it. And the V means violence. Okay? And there's other ones. L for language, S for sexuality or sexual stuff. So you have to be aware. So when those things pop up, it gives you a clue. Again, it gives you a clue. Personally, again, I would pre-watch everything. Pre-watch any of these shows, especially if you don't know anything about these shows, because you have to be very careful. And I just want to share this quick story. When I was at the doctor's office, and pediatrician ward, they had Disney Channel up. Okay? So doctor's office, pediatric ward, Disney Channel, you figure everything's okay, right? I don't have Disney Channel, so I didn't know. So I'm sitting there. And the premise of almost all of these shows, especially Disney Channel and ABC Family, is one of the worst channels. ABC Family is disgusting. But the premise of these shows is all relationships. How I can hook up with somebody, right? How I can have a boyfriend, girlfriend, this and that. So in this show, and I told you, I'm not going to mince words today, okay? I'm doing this for shock value so you understand what's out there. And you may think innocently, I'll put Disney Channel for my child because Disney is Disney. Oh, fairy tales and stuff. It's beautiful, right? So this child the parents were there, and this child is having this conversation with their parents about the first sexual. This girl was probably about 12 or 13 years old, just from looking at her, maybe 13, 14. She's talking about the first kind of sexual experience she was having with her boyfriend. And the mother said, "Oh, I remember when that happened with me with your father." So instead of having a corrective behavior being modeled by the adult in the show, they're actually completely, validating the inappropriate behavior by the adult itself, by the adult themselves in the show. Okay? So this is the message that's being given by the show. So again, it could be Disney Channel, whatever, TV7, whatever kind of a thing. You need to be aware of the type of shows that are on these channels. Don't just assume. Okay? Don't just assume. Now, some suggestions. You can jot this down. Again, we're going to share this, inshallah. But so these are some websites they rate movies and things. Okay? They rate movies. So for example, this one right here called Kids in Mind, as an example. You go to their website and then you can see, whatever movie is out on Star Wars, right? It'll show Star Wars, and then it breaks it down into 3 categories: language, sexuality, and violence. And they'll rate it. Again, they're not Muslims, but it's pretty helpful. And it'll give a rating, and it'll say, out of 10, 10 being the worst in these things, this one has a 2 for sexuality, or 5 for language, and 6 for violence, for example. And they'll give you a little synopsis, and it'll actually describe, some of the type of sexual stuff or the type of this and that, so you have a really good idea about what's in the movie or TV show, right? So there's some websites that are out there. There's, other people of conscious similar to us that are interested in these things. So, these are some of the examples of those websites. So, again, we'll share that with you as well, inshallah. Now, when it comes to the internet, pornography is extremely prevalent. It's extremely prevalent. And even, for example, just simple searches, the people are so sick that they know that people might misspell things, especially kids. So you may have some, I'm just making this up, I don't know if this is for sure, but let's say Mickey Mouse, right? And if there's any little bit of a misspelling of Mickey Mouse, all of a sudden a pornographic site will come up. And there's things similar to that. Not exactly maybe Mickey Mouse, but there's, in that type of vein. It is out there, it is very prevalent. It is very prevalent, okay? You can do, if you don't have safe searching, on your YouTube or your Google searches, stuff just comes up. Images, they may be innocently looking for things. They may be looking up, for a social studies project. They type in a country, and then all of a sudden you see all these things about this country, right? So, pornography is something that it's very much out there, and it's addictive. And there's a lot of research about in the brain, the reaction that the brain has to pornography is very similar to other types of drugs. The chemical reaction that occurs in the brain is very similar to other types of drugs, okay? And gambling and things like that. I'm not going to get into the whole neurological aspect of it, but it's addictive. It's addictive. So you have to try to keep them from that gateway drug, I guess, which is, semi-nudity or whatever kind of a thing that leads to other things. So you have to be very careful with the pornography. Social media, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Gaming. Gaming, again, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but there's two huge things. Most of the most popular games, and I'm going to show you the top 10 of 2015, the top 10 games of 2015. And you'll see the majority of them are grossly violent or hypersexualized. And you have to be careful. Sometimes our kid asks for something for eat or whatever, and we just buy it for them. We don't realize what it is and what's on those games. Okay? When it comes to streaming video, things like Netflix and Hulu and YouTube, Netflix has a genre of homosexual movies. That's one of the options. Action, adventure, mystery, suspense, kids movies, homosexuality is there, just like any other category. Right? So you have your video game system in your child's room. You think all they're doing is playing, basketball on the video game or soccer, FIFA. You don't know. You have to be very careful, right? Hypersexuality, again, how many movies are about that? Comedies. Be careful with comedies. Comedies, number one, most of the comedies, the comedy itself is inappropriate. Like even Islamically, they're making fun of people in ways that make them feel bad. This is inappropriate. The comedy itself is very sexualized comedy. Most of the comedy is sexualized comedy. So you have to be very careful with these things. It's just fun. You don't want to have fun? Yeah, you got to have fun in a way that's appropriate, right? The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that, you cannot lie even to tell a joke. You're not supposed to lie. And then, obviously the violence that's out there. On the internet as well, the type of websites that are out there when it comes to lifestyle choices, right? There's so many of these websites that promote different types of lifestyles that don't necessarily mesh with Islam. And it puts a lot of, it's just shaitan's whispers in ways of questioning a lot of things that the children really shouldn't be exposed to. A lot of ideological websites, and this could lead to various extremes. So you have to be very careful with the extremist groups, whether it be extreme, right-wing groups, that are always criticizing Islam and this is not Islamophobia, blah, blah, blah. You have extreme left-wing groups that say, there is no God, stuff like that, and why are you following the superstitions and stuff like that, right? And then obviously you have the crazies of, Islamic extremists and stuff. They're professionals, unfortunately. Hitler was a professional. Shaitan is a professional. He's a professional. He knows how to get us off track. He's a professional. We have to give credit in that sense so that we can guard ourselves from that. So we have to, again, educate our children and be aware of these type of things that are out there. And the other piece, too, is this idea of the 24-hour news cycle. Okay, these websites that are available 24 hours. So whether it be about politics, whether it be about sports, the backdoor means of deception through the the in-purchase apps or through the commercials that are on there. But even more than that, like when we were growing up, there were only 3 TV stations basically. So if you had a certain way of thinking, you had to be exposed to other ways of thinking because you didn't have an option, right? You watched CBS Evening News, whether you agreed with Walter Cronkite or not, or Dan Rather or not, you were exposed to it. But now, because of all the information that's out there, you actually can stay in your own world forever and never hear another opinion about anything. And that's actually not good too. So you end up, and that's how you get these Trumpites or whatever. They don't get exposed to anything new, right? And our kids can fall prey to that as well in terms of just staying in their world and never being exposed to other positive things and other positive ways of thinking. So that's just some internet stuff to be aware of. Now, when it comes to social media, obviously, we know a lot of the websites that are out there, like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and all these different things. There's other ones like Kik and Cyberdust that the stuff that's on there disappears. So, and this is where a lot of what's called sexting happens. So this is where a lot of youth, including our youth, including Muslim youth from Muslim families who practice, they will, some of them, and may Allah protect all of our children from this, but they will take pictures of themselves in, either dressed inappropriately or not dressed at all, and send it to people through text or through these websites, and then it disappears, so you can't even track it. Okay? So you have to be very careful. Again, you need to educate your children and instill this idea of haya. This is one of the things that the common mistakes that we have as parents, that we wait till the kids are teenagers before we start talking about these things. And it's already too late. They've been exposed too much. And we wait too long to start talking to them about Islam and what it means to be a Muslim and a young lady and a young man, right? Until they're already men and women in Allah's eyes, right? 12, 13, 14, they're already men, women in Allah's eyes, yet we have had no conversation with them. And so they haven't been trained as a young person to love Allah, fear Allah, have modesty and these type of things. It's very, very important. Hooking up, we've had cases in this community of these type of situations, of online communication, and then the youth ends up hooking up with somebody, non-Muslim, Muslim, whatever, at the masjid. And I've seen this actually in numerous masajid, from Virginia to here in Maryland, where the masjid was the place to hook up. And even in Ramadan, during Taraweeh, they come to sell drugs or they come to hook up. So your youth, you're coming here for salah, you don't know what's going on with your children. They're out over here, they're over here, and they're going to different parts of the neighborhood. You got to be aware, right? But why aren't they with you praying? Okay, so this is another issue that we need to really be aware of. So some of the threats obviously from social media, the sexual predators and the hooking up culture, it's hypersexualized. We need to be very aware of that's out there. Number 2, the depression. By living this virtual world, we have kids, our own students, some of them aren't even old enough technically to have a Facebook profile, and some of them have multiple profiles. We've had students and just youth that I know in the community, and again, not just here. This is something across the board. It's not something, ISB, whatever. No, this is everywhere. That the youth themselves will fake who they are and even trick their friends. And then they'll have these virtual relationships with people, playing jokes on them. And they'll break up with them, and the person's crying, and these are Muslim kids. And the kid is crying and depressed because this person broke up, and it's their friend. You have all, these multiple personalities going on, and there's no real relationship, right? There's no real face-to-face human relationship, okay? You have this cyberbullying that goes on. Once you're online all the time. So, when we grew up, you might get some bullying, some harassment, whatever, but you go home and you're safe. Now you go home and you're getting texted. They keep harassing you. Then you go on your internet. They're harassing you. Then they post a picture of you that they've doctored up or photoshopped that makes you look really ugly or something like that. And it just keeps pounding and keeps pounding, right? You have to establish a relationship with your child so that they will communicate with you if they are experiencing any of these type of things, okay? We talked about sexting. Identity theft, don't think it's just for adults, right? The child is on there and they're talking about giving all this information and stuff like that. People can open up accounts and things like that using that data and that information. Tell your children not to give that information. Obviously, FBI, the student's reputation, the child's reputation, you got to be very careful about what they say on the internet, right? Politically or whatever, because people are watching and they could be misconstrued. Obviously, people don't know how to communicate anymore by writing because everything is by text or Twittered, so everything is really short. So they don't know how to express themselves clearly. They do all these LOLs and stuff like that, right? And that could be very easily misconstrued. And then all of a sudden now you're part of an investigation that, I don't support what they did in Gaza. Does that mean I'm a terrorist? No, right? But depending on how you say it and what you say, it could mean something very different in the eyes of different people. And again, the idea of reputation for the children. I said this a lot to the boys, but it's the same for the girls too. You're posting all this stuff. You're exposing yourself to everybody. You're talking about all these things that you did. Oh, it's so cool. But your reputation has been ruined. And you can't turn that back. You cannot turn that back. It's very, very dangerous. And then Islamically, obviously, besides the angels writing everything, now everybody and their mama knows about you and all the stuff that you've done. So they're going to talk about you, against you on the Day of Judgment too. Like before, you did something bad, you hit it, maybe 5 people know. Now you have 1 million. You posted it on YouTube. Yeah, I got all these hits. Yeah, I got all these hits for haram. Right? Now you got 1 million people going to talk against you on the Day of Judgment. So these are the kind of conversations that we need to have with the children. And obviously the extremist views like we mentioned before. So just quickly, talking about video games and the dangers also of the video game systems. So these are the top 10 video games in 2015 by sales. Now if you look, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, and kind of number 8 are violent in nature. And some of them have sexuality in them. So for example, Grand Theft Auto. So obviously the premise of the game is stealing, which is haram anyway, right? So you shouldn't be getting that game. Muslims love that game, by the way, unfortunately. And I know people that for Eid, they get it. Parents don't know. They write it down what you want and they buy it. They don't pay attention. Grand Theft Auto, you get extra points. Again, I'm going to be very open so you understand. There's extra points, for example, for going with a prostitute and then killing her afterwards. You get extra bonus points. Okay? That's in the video game. Besides the stealing of the car and all the other kind of stuff and running away from police and ramming into them and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So just be aware, this is the stuff that's in these games. And then besides that, the systems itself, like I mentioned before, have access to the internet. So they can go on and, you think, again, they're playing FIFA or hockey or whatever, which inshallah should be fine for them to do. And then, but they're actually going on the internet and watching this and, having access to that or whatever. So you have to be very mindful and aware of that. Again, I would not allow them to have these things in their bedroom. No way. And, I would suggest having schedules and stuff like that, so you're aware when they're using it and whatnot, and have it in public parts of the house, so that at least there'll be a little bit more, fear. And tape something on the computer itself that says, Allah's watching, just as a reminder, like a visual reminder, right? Because we're human, we forget sometimes. Make the password to the computer Bismillah, something like that, right? Just to kind of have that little bit of a reminder for them, inshallah. So just to finish with this, in terms of the Islamic issues with all of this all coming together, and then we'll open up for a little bit of question and answer. Number 1, obviously the issue of time, right? How much time really are we wasting on this? And this is a reminder for myself first and foremost, right? Electronics, it's like a drug. It's difficult. Once you start having that thing, it's hard to put it down, even as adults. But how much time are we wasting? So we need to be really honest with ourselves and then teach this to our children too. So we need to make sure. Number 2, this idea of false personalities. And this is one thing that's, very much cursed in Islam. Being two-faced and having, this idea of multiple personality. You're, one way with certain people, another way with other people. This is not the type of thing that we should be encouraging in our children. Be who you are, and be open and honest about who you are. A lot of times the kids, they know, I have my Islamic life, there's certain things I can't do, so they act out in this virtual world because they feel safe behind the screen because there's nobody in front of them. And they say nasty things because the person's not in front of them, right? So we want to encourage them to have face-to-face relationships with people, not virtual relationships with people, because again, you feel safer in that way. You forget, it's easier to forget that Allah's watching. So sometimes just having the person in front of you is a check, right? But if that check is not there, then it becomes easy to say nasty things or to do things or to visit certain stuff. We want them to play more. Go outside and play. Don't play soccer, FIFA video game. Go outside and play soccer with a human being, right? And even with their parent. Oh my gosh, can you imagine, right? Establish a relationship with your child and play with them, no matter how old they are. Like how many of your kids, think about it, how many of your kids have toys? Actually have toys that they play with using their own imagination. How many of them actually have toys that they play with? And how many of them get bored by that and would rather just sit in front of the TV doing the video game, right? You're stunting their creativity also because the environment is created for them in the video game or on the website as opposed to them creating the environment themselves. This is a higher order thinking skill that's not happening in their brain. So you're hurting them educationally also. They're exposing their sins and their faults openly. So we need to instill this idea of haya and modesty in them. It's easy to speak without knowledge too, right? What is your opinion on this? Oh, girl, no, it's okay. Go ahead and take it off, kind of a thing. And it's easy to speak though. Again, there's nobody in front of you. There's nobody to check you. There's no one to have a conversation with. Or, the disagreement is not in the moment, face to face. And if you don't like somebody, I'm just going to unfriend them. Or I'll just turn off the computer or I'll turn off my phone, right? But when the person's in front of you, it's different. The level of respect is different. The conversation is different. You have to be a little bit more open. And this is a huge issue, this next one, neglecting responsibilities. And I don't know how many people, and I'm sure you have people in your mind right now that they stay up all night long on the computer or playing a video game or whatever it is, and they fall asleep right before Fajr. Right? Or, they're playing the game, or watching the sports thing on TV or watching the TV show, and then the time they hear the adhan, they say, oh, it's almost done, it's okay, a little bit more, and then boom, Dhuhr's out and it's Asr time. They're neglecting their responsibilities, right? We need to teach the children, that's it. This all can pause, right? And non-religious responsibilities, studying for schoolwork, doing your chores at home, right? They get caught in this world, and they need to be able to break out of that. And then exposure to risk behaviors and other indecencies. And I just want to show you this quickly so that you all can be aware of some of these things here, inshallah. Because one of the things that, a lot of times we give out data, we give out statistics, and I know the first thing in our mind is, it may say 70% of youth are doing this, but my kid is part of the 30% that's not. And we all think that, right? Everybody of those 70% thinks their kid is the 30%. Everybody. Assume the opposite so that you can be more involved in your child. Not to say that you need to be mean and, suspicious of everything, but just to be safe. Just to be safe and to be, aware and whatnot. So there's this website here. They've done some research about American Muslim youth and their risk behaviors, okay? So just quickly. So this is Muslim college students. This is the girls' data, this is the boys' data. How many of Muslim college students at least once have had premarital sex? 48% of Muslim girls, 57% of Muslim boys. Drugs, 20%, 30%. Right? Alcohol, almost 50% for the girls, more girls than boys. Can you believe that? Almost 1 in 2. So the issue is, what are we doing when they're young to prepare them for when they're on their own? What are we doing when they're young to prepare them for when they get that cell phone and they have it and you're not around? What are we doing when they're young, right? To prepare them for being exposed to all these challenges and whispers of shaitan and whispers from their friends to deal with these type of issues. Now it says, here it says, of the 58% or 59% who tried one of these behaviors, right? 77% did 2 or more of them. So of the 58% who tried one of these, 77% of that 58% did it more than one of them. Okay? So this is this is the stuff that we're facing in the Muslim community. In the Muslim community. And this goes to the second point before we switch off, do a little bit of question and answer, and switch off to Brother Ajamu in terms of how do we safeguard ourselves and our children from this. We need to stop, I guess, putting our heads in the sand, about a lot of these issues. And we need to also be more of a voice in the non-Muslim society as well, because we can't think that we're going to shield ourselves from what's going on in the society. It's already showing that that's not working. We cannot be in a bubble. It doesn't exist, especially now with all these electronic devices. If that's the case, then that means we have to go out and actually help fix all of society, because all of society is affecting us. So as a community, we need to do a better job of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil to the whole of society, not just within our community, so that everybody can have an improved way of life. And that, by default, will improve our children's way of life as well. You understand what I'm saying? So obviously, yes, we fix our own house, but we also have to fix our neighbor's house. Otherwise, the neighborhood will still go down the drain, right? So let's keep that in mind. So these are some of the websites. All of them are links about a lot of different things that I had mentioned, evidences and articles and things like that. So inshallah, just want to open up just two quick things when it comes to questions, because I'm sure I'm going to get these 2 questions. So I'm just going to preempt. If you have other questions, please write them down in your index cards and then pass them up. One of them is, okay, Brother Jose, it's too late. Like, I already gave them all this stuff. I already gave my kids all this stuff. What am I going to do? Right? Like, they already have their video game and their laptop and their cell phone already in the room. What am I going to do? Right? You need to have a lot of conversations with them. Explain to them. Show them the information. Okay? Talk to them. You have to explain why. If you try to just, what they call cold turkey, and just pull everything away after you've given everything, they'll rebel and they will go underground, meaning they'll hide and they'll find other ways because they've already been introduced to it. So even if you made a mistake and you allowed it, that's fine. You have to have conversations and take it away bit by bit. So let's say, for example, they have everything. At least take away the clear haram stuff. So they have video games, let them have certain ones, but maybe take away the ones that just are extremely inappropriate, right? Maybe, whatever, the TV that you have in their room, you can have certain access, cut off the Wi-Fi after a certain hour, and let them know and have the conversation. And even tell them that, look, I just went to a workshop. I'm really scared right now, and I love you very much. You got to tell them, I love you very much, and I care about you, and I want you to go to Jannah. I love you very much, and I want you to go to Jannah. I'm nervous. I know you have all these things. What do you suggest I should do? I personally would love to take it all away. Tell them, I would love to take it all away, but I know I can't do that. What do you suggest? And come up with a plan together. But don't just leave it. And that goes to the second question, that they're going to whine and complain and all their friends have it and, all this kind of stuff, and they're just going to give me a hard time. What should I do? So the first question to me is a legitimate one. The second question to me is not. And I'm just going to be blunt about it. Who's the parent in the house? Who's the parent in the house? Who's in charge? Who's the one that's going to have to answer in front of Allah for the way those children were raised? You. So, yes, they're going to moan and complain and compare themselves to their friend who has all 1,000,000 different type of gadgets and iPhone, watches, and all this other kind of stuff. So what? That again, what did you teach them about what is valuable? What did you teach them about this idea of what is needed in terms of, having a happy life and that type of thing? And that comes through time even from when they're young. So there's 2 of those questions. I don't know if there are any other ones. You can pass that up, inshallah. I want to make sure that we have time for Brother Ajamu as well, inshallah. So if you have any of those questions, just pass them up, inshallah. Maybe we can wait. About how long do you need? Okay. So inshallah, are there any questions? Yes.
Rather than the question, just like when you read about biographies like about Steve Jobs, he would never let his kids be accustomed to technology, cell phones, or anything.
Yep.
Until they're late adults.
Yep.
And he's the inventor.
Yes. So he mentioned about Steve Jobs, the late CEO of Apple, that he himself said he would not allow his children to use those electronic products because he knew the negative effect that it had. So and most of those in Silicon Valley, actually they have the schools that are opening up in Silicon Valley don't have technology in them. And most of them have a lot of hands-on work and experiments and stuff like that. This whole technology thing, it's overblown. It's really overblown, especially even in the educational field. It's really overblown. Get their hands dirty, right? Instead of watching a video about how a tree grows, let them go out and grow a tree.